It's Friday and we're running late.
It's Friday, Kona weekend. Well, we're early in Kona,
We are.
late in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But something tells me you had a late night last night, and that's probably maybe just getting out of bed. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a late night. It was a long day, but a lot of fun, and I'll tell you, inspiring as well. I was talking with Laura, and the reason why we're late is because we actually did a pre-episode with an athlete who did the race. So, but yeah, I was telling her that I was just spent a lot of time at the finish line and watching all different athletes finish. Some were ecstatic and they just were, through the roof in what they just accomplished. Some were really disappointed and hung their head as they crossed the finish line. And then there was a group that was sort of in between and just sort of, blasé about it. And I almost wonder if they were just so, just overwhelmed with the event that maybe they just couldn't figure out, should I be happy? What should I be at this point?
Emotionally spent, maybe like
Emotionally spent. Yeah.
I think that's a real thing.
I agree. And you cross that finish line and you just, now what? What happened? No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, being support crew, but it's worth it because it's great to see the athletes cross that finish line and just share that excitement with them.
So, John, you were Sherpa extraordinaire plus support crew. So, how did you get onto a paddleboard?
Well, the other thing that, and both Laura and I have done this in the past, whenever we're supporting the other athlete, like she supported me or I'm supporting her, we do try to volunteer for the event in some capacity.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's, we do it the day before, a setup type of thing, or the day of. And if I'm volunteering, I almost always like to volunteer in the swim, because I know if someone's going to get in real trouble in a triathlon, it's going to be in the swim. And it's just nice to be part of, back in my day, I was lifeguard a long period of time, and it's just nice to be able to get back that way and to help. Of course, paddleboarding, I don't stand on the paddleboard.
Oh, were you on your knees the entire time, or were you kind of straddling it?
I'm sitting, I'm on my knees, but I don't stand. So I am not, my balance is not that good to paddleboard. I'd be falling in quite a bit.
So you'd be falling into an athlete.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
So did anyone have to come and hang on to your paddleboard?
Just a couple this time.
Yeah.
And at a race like this, that's expected. It's because people have to qualify or there's other pathways in where it's still, you've got to be fit to get a ticket to get into this. And so really it's expected that there's only going to be a few. I just see one person was getting aided by another paddleboarder, and then another one was really throwing up while holding on to a jet ski. He did eventually finish, but I don't know if it was because he took salt water in or getting seasick, because there were some pretty good swells and some chop in the course, and the current was really pulling people off the track quite a bit.
Well, I do know it's a thing, like, bringing in seawater is one way, and you're right, like the seasickness, I've felt that before in big swell.
Yeah.
You get disoriented, and then you get a little bit of seawater in your mouth, and next thing you know, you're not feeling very good.
No.
And that can carry on a long time throughout the day even.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because that does, like, if you're not comfortable with that and you do get the swim done, you're setting yourself up for an even longer day at that point, because you're really behind the eight ball. And we've talked about this before, where once you get out of the swim, you're already behind in terms of your hydration and your nutrition. And so now if you're behind and you're seasick or something along that lines, it's just going to make it a rougher day. And so that's why I know Laura was really interested in doing the practice swim, just to go through and get used to the type of swells that are out there, the type of chop that you're going to see, how the current moves you. And that was good. That was reassuring. So race day came and she had already done it and had that confidence. I think that's just a smart move.
So was the condition similar between the practice swim and the race swim?
For the most part, yeah. Every time that I've swum here in Kona or visited Kona, it's very typical. Some big swells, some little bit of chop, and then it's just a matter of figuring out which way the water's going to pull you.
Yep.
And it's not always the same. Since I'm not an ocean expert in terms of currents, and but I know when I'm swimming in there, I've got to figure it out each time. And even that morning, what was happening was current was pulling people out seaward. And so as they were even aiming for the first buoy, they were already getting pulled off course. And a lot of us paddleboarders had to intervene and get them back on course right from the very start.
So were they being pulled to the right of the swimmers right or the swimmers left?
Well, as they're swimming out, they would be pulling they would have been pulled to the right. So they're
Okay.
swimming parallel to the shore,
Yeah.
going counterclockwise on the island, and would have
Yeah.
been pulled out
Yeah.
away from the shore.
And away from the course.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Oh,
And
wow.
then coming back, the same thing. Now you're being pulled leftward side, or again away from the shore, and so you're being pulled out. And the one thing that in the paddleboard briefing, they did say, don't let your athletes get out too far, because sometimes when they get out there that far, it's actually hard to get them back in.
Well, and you might even lose them, right? Or lose track of them, right?
Yeah.
Because especially in swells and
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
wow, that's interesting. I think that does play into, there's probably many people there that haven't swam in the ocean or haven't swum in the ocean much, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of places in the world where the qualifying races wouldn't have been in ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And they may not have that experience. So I think it's really interesting to hear that perspective,
Mm-hmm.
because I wouldn't think that would happen as much, where you
Mhm.
actually have that. But I wonder if it's partly because it's in a harbor that you get
Mhm.
more current coming in and out.
Yeah, and again, I'm not an expert on how that works here, especially. But even swimming just outside our condo here, I'll tell you what, if you enter the water one place, you can. It's sometimes hard to get back to that same exact place because of the way the waves are coming in and going back out. So it is tricky, and ocean swimming is different than swimming in the lake. But in terms of tracking, I'll tell you one of the things I've noticed when I've done this swim support in the past, and even in this race, is the people who go off course are the ones who are not sighting enough.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people don't sight frequently because they're not comfortable. It disrupts their stroke. And then they tend to not sight as often. I'll see people swim, 50 strokes, and I'm trying to get their attention as a paddleboarder to get them back on course, and they don't even see me. And so it's really, really important to practice that sighting so it doesn't disrupt your stroke, and you can sight frequently and still have a good swim time.
So I don't remember where I saw this, but it kind of makes me think of this. So maybe it was on Mythbusters or something, where they put people in a field.
Yeah.
And did you ever see this one? And they had to walk.
I did, yeah.
So this is what reminds me of it. They put a blindfold on, and all I said, you have to walk across the field. And I think it was only a couple hundred yards, and nobody could do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And many people just literally walked in circles.
Yep.
And in swimming is the same way, right? It may be even worse in the ocean.
It's worse. It is worse overall because you always feel like you're swimming straight because the water's always passing over you in that direction. And so it's not like you're getting a crosswind.
Yeah.
You're always swimming into the water. You just may not be swimming in the direction that you're swimming in.
Yeah. Well, and it's different too. Like, for example, if you're at, I don't know, maybe Lake Mead, and you've been there many times, even your peripheral vision, as you look up to breathe, you can see, okay, like that hill is over there.
Yeah.
But when you're in the ocean in particular, if you're in a trough, and you look, all you see is the water. Next time you look, you're in the trough or you're in the chop. You don't see anything. Or if you're breathing to the right, let's say, and the ocean is to the right, there's no perspective. That peripheral vision. And so like I find like in small lakes, even like Sand Hollow, I don't have to sight as much. I am seeing like the island. I'm seeing I'm seeing the shore.
Right.
And so at least I know I'm going the general direction. Like I haven't like gone on and done a U-turn or turned right or left. But I think that the ocean swimming, it does mean, or does, you're correct, that you have to sight more.
Mhm. And you mentioned the swells and being in the low point of a swell, you have to time your sighting so you can see something. And that's, part of just getting some experience swimming in swells and swimming in ocean. So,
Yeah, well, I've noticed when I swim in the ocean, I'm in a down, a trough.
yeah.
And I look to sight, I'm like, okay, I got a next stroke, I have to sight again because I should be higher.
Yep.
Because you can't always sense it.
Mhm.
When when you've looked down for 5 or 6 strokes, you can't always sense if you're up or down.
Yeah.
And the ocean's very unpredictable. You could have double swell, double
Mhm.
trough.
Yeah.
And but yeah, you're right. It takes a lot of experience to do that. And
Mhm.
it must have been real interesting to see in this race, because like you were saying, you have to be a pretty accomplished athlete to get into this race.
Right.
So you're watching very accomplished athletes struggle with this,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So if we were just to take any other Ironman or long distance race, it would probably be, there'd be a lot more people doing this.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I've volunteered doing swim support for other 70.3 races. And it's a little bit more of a challenge because you just don't, you have a more variety of fitness levels within the race.
So were you on swim support until the last swimmer got out?
Yep, I stayed. Some people get out early, but I knew, all our athletes were out on the course at that point, so there's nothing for me to do.
There's nothing for you to see, right?
So really it was 3 hours or 4 hours of free paddleboarding. So
That's what I'm saying. Like, you didn't have to rent a paddleboard for 3 or 4
I
hours.
didn't. That's
It's
right.
great. You probably actually got a heck of a workout. It'd be really interesting to see your caloric burn from yesterday, by the way.
And I did paddleboard almost all the way down to the turn buoy. I was about 2 buoys short of it, and then I turned around because there was a swimmer going off, and I wanted to get back to that swimmer pretty quick. And so I probably had a paddleboard, 2+ miles pretty easily.
So after that, did you go? Then you went to Sherpa mode, or did you do other work?
Yeah, and I was already in Sherpa mode because I would I had my phone with me on the paddleboard, and there were times where I was mostly just sitting there again because the athletes are all doing pretty good. So I was able to check a tracker just here and there just to see where everybody was initially. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and so it was so I returned my paddleboard, and then it was just full on support in terms of figuring out where people were, where I needed to be, and the logistics of doing that, it's not necessarily easy.
No. So I have to ask, did you track your steps yesterday?
You know what? I didn't, and I wish
I really wanted to know.
Well, steps. I wonder if it recorded. I'll have to see if the steps do show up automatically. I actually don't know.
Were you wearing your watch?
I was, yeah.
It might automatically track them. That would be actually very interesting to know. Because I know you were active all day and moving around all day. And then if you add all the paddling, those would totally count as steps too. I wouldn't be surprised if you put in 30,000 steps yesterday.
Yeah.
By the time you added it all up.
And this we need to do an episode on how to be support crew, how to be Sherpa, because it is important that the Sherpa takes care of themselves. And I was really paying attention to my fluid intake and calorie intake because I knew it's going to be a midnight 1 a.m. Type of day, and so you just have to maintain your own energy, because if you're exhausted, you can't help your athlete either mentally or physically. So.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, what did you learn yesterday?
It's a bit of affirmation that you got to plan everything out, but then you have to be ready to adjust the plan. And I know that's such an odd way of thinking about it, but the day is sometimes unpredictable, and you just need to be able to know how to react, whether it's a different temperature than you expect, or a different wind setup, or it's one segment's taking longer than you thought, or quicker than you thought. you got to adapt. But, I was talking with one athlete and they had a great swim. And so they didn't take the nutrition that they had planned on in the transition because great swim, gets you going. And then ended up, paying a little bit of a calorie price later on. And thinking back, they should have stuck to that plan. So, on one hand, this is why these races are so hard because, you say you got a plan, but then you got to adapt. But when do you adapt and when do you stick to the plan? It's not easy.
That's an interesting one too. Like, I was actually thinking about that. Is it worth it to have a longer T1, right? By maybe even a minute and get those calories in.
Yeah.
It absolutely is, right? Because, and we've talked about before, you've been out in the water, not just out in the water, but you're prepping, you're loading up.
Yeah.
It could be 2 hours between, when you had your last food and then you get on the bike and, getting on the bike that first 5 miles, nobody eats.
Right.
Especially in the age group racing, it's so hectic. There's so much going on. The last thing you're thinking about is eating, right? And so now you're maybe extending that to 2.5 hours. And now you're so far behind. And that 1 minute of having a gel or having some food could make the difference, and honestly make the difference at the end of a race of 20 or 30 minutes. Right. And I think you're exactly right. Having a plan, and especially in the beginning, if things aren't going, if things are going better than you expected or as you expected, stick to the plan.
Yeah, right.
I get it. If things are not going as expected, maybe you need to deviate from your plan. But if things are going to plan or better than, stick to it.
Yeah. Because you spend a lot of time on that, thinking about it and what to do, and you just have to enact that plan. But I think you're right. If things aren't going the way that you think they should be going, that is probably the first clue that you gotta adjust.
Yeah. And, and just watching the race on TV yesterday, and actually I finished watching it about 4 o'clock today. I'll admit I was watching it in my car as I was driving, listening to it in the car.
Yeah.
Seeing Chelsea Sodaro and how she executed the plan.
Yeah, right.
It was a master class in how you race an Ironman. And I'm sure you haven't watched the whole thing yet.
No, I haven't.
But I'm telling you, she was methodical in the aid stations and controlled herself on the bike. And I mean, she was many times walking an aid station, slowed down, jogging an aid station, got everything you could tell she got everything, had a plan at every single aid station. And then her run plan, I mean, she ran the pace that she could run. Like her last couple miles, it was a little bit slower than her first couple, but not much. So you could tell she knew what she could do if she executed her nutrition plan, and if she executed her bike plan and her swim plan, it was going to come to fruition. And I know she seemed shocked when she finished, at least it would appeared on TV, but for me, it was just like, she shouldn't be shocked because this was the perfect execution of a race. And, and to be in the lead of a race and then still have the fortitude to I'm in the lead. I still need to walk the aid station. I still need to get in when I need to get in. I still need to not overrun. I still need to, I can't let my emotions get away from me. And I think that was a really good lesson for people. So if people, you can still watch the race, obviously. I hope I didn't ruin it for you.
No. Well, no, I saw Lucy Charles come through on the run. It was about the 4-mile mark, and right behind her with probably 30 seconds was Danielle Reed. I'm like, oh boy, I wonder if this is going to be a repeat where Danielle just runs away with it at that point. And then I saw them again coming back, and Lucy Charles had built her lead quite considerably, and I'm like, wow, this is going to be the day that Lucy wins. And then later on, then I got busy with finding everyone and tracking them, and then I saw something that someone won the race that no one expected, and I'm like, what happened? So I had to go back and look at the tracker and see that Kelsey came in and won. But I'll tell you that actually some of the real sharp people, there were a few people that did give Chelsea sort of the credit that she does deserve, that she could podium or even win the race, but not a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, the question is that was was it because the plan was executed? I mean, that's what we started with this, and watching it, that's what it appeared. The other thing I'll tell you is if and when you get a chance to watch it, her run cadence and her short stride is something that I've been trying to get people to do. And it's something that I've been working on personally is, her cadence was high and her stride length was short and soft. And very little vertical oscillation. I mean, these are things we've talked about before. Small ground contact time, no vertical oscillation, no overstriding. Even on the downhills, really controlled stride length. And something that when I'm watching her, I'm like, that's how I need to run. Like I need to emulate that.
Yeah.
And especially on tired legs, like overstriding on tired legs is on a rolling course, even more reason, right? Because you don't build up that fatigue on the downhills as much. I mean, honestly, it was a masterclass in running as well. And so, I mean, it was interesting. I learned a ton just by watching her.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I'll have to go watch it. I have not seen her run other than just the, short clips. So
I think it'll be good for your biomechanics of endurance course, honestly, to actually compare and contrast her versus Lucy Charles. And Lucy Charles is a great runner.
Oh, she was looking good when I saw her. And again, that's why I'm sitting there thinking, oh, she's going to have it. But it's so unpredictable, especially here, because, the elements they can have an additive effect on people. And what may seem okay at one point, a couple miles later, it's not okay.
And don't get me wrong, like she did great, but she had more vertical oscillation and took longer strides, like and it's having quite a significant longer stride. And she's been able to do that, and that's great. But like if I was to emulate somebody, I would emulate Chelsea on the day. Not just because she won, like but somebody that knows running and knows running form. Like I think you're going to really enjoy seeing that.
All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah. So any other lessons that you learned?
I guess again, it's affirmation that the day can change so quickly. And I was, also spending time in transition. And so I would see people coming in on the bike and they destroyed themselves on the bike. And then they're coming out of transition, starting to run. And they were in a lot of pain. And it was going to be a hard marathon if they finished it all. And so, affirmation of that, back to the plan idea, you got to have a plan that's sustainable. And I've been there where you overbike and you come out, and for the conditions you overbike. You may have thought that you could sustain some power, but for the wind and the heat and humidity, maybe it wasn't, smart to stay at that plan of that power. And all of a sudden you're getting off and I think you've talked about this before. And so, when you do have the winds, especially, and all of a sudden your plan of being at whatever, 180 watts for 6 hours or 6.5 hours, all of a sudden you're doing 180 watts for 7 hours or 7:15 because of the wind. You've just extended yourself far further than you were trained for.
Well, and the truth is most people preparing for an Ironman, we've talked about this, 100 miles is kind of their limit ride.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe I should characterize most people, a lot of people, that's their, and you look at a lot of training plans and it's okay, go out and we've talked about this, do a couple 100-milers, which is fine. But think about it, if you're doing 100 miles in a relatively flat, not windy place, not hot, and then you go to Kona and it's hilly, it's windy, and it's hot. And you're right. If you're out there now, your 100-mile ride on your local course was 5 hours, and now you're at 7 hours.
Yeah.
Your power plan's got to be different, and you probably have not built up the enough robustness in your system.
Yeah.
Take on that. And I know, like, don't get me wrong, like I know that because I've done it. Riding 6 hours, 7 hours is hard. It's
Yeah.
mentally hard. It's hard to fit in your schedule, right? We've talked about this with like life balance, where it's Sunday or Saturday, and it's like, okay, I have a 6.5 hour ride today, and you start, let's say, I don't know, 7 a.m. Well, next thing you know, it's 1:30, 2 o'clock when you're finishing, and you're devastated,
Mm-hmm.
and the day's done.
Mm-hmm.
And your family might not really appreciate that, or you might feel guilty about doing that, and so you don't do it. And I get it. Like, trust me, I get it. Like, life gets in the way. But if you want to compete and you want to be successful at this type of race, those are the things I think you have to do those.
Yeah, no, for totally. And, because I think the other part that leads to is you start entering those dark spots of the race far sooner than you anticipate. And, when you're doing these endurance events, everybody's going to hit a dark spot. Well, almost everybody will.
Almost everybody. Yeah.
And it really is a matter of how you get through that. And again, I saw, some of the athletes that I was talking with, that I'd see them at the first mile, and it's just, you got to recalibrate, you got to focus, and you got to say, okay, here's where you're going. And here, and sometimes as support person, all you're trying to do is remind them what their plan was, so that they can say, okay, let me go back and focus on the plan. And as long as I stick to that plan, I was going to be successful. And now, try to just reset that at that point, because it's so easy to get stuck, thinking, well, now I've got a marathon. It's too big. It's too big of a task to try to think about at that time.
No, I agree. It's I don't know. Just watching the whole thing and tracking everybody yesterday. It is actually interesting. Most of the people from Las Vegas raced yesterday.
Yeah, I know. We got 7 of our 9, so we got 2 more on Saturday.
Two more tomorrow. It was like, wow, if you really wanted to watch the Vegas people, yesterday was the day to do it.
I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I probably, I don't know. It seems more stressful to watch the Thursday race and then, forced to be a day off, because you can't train because everything's closed.
That's true.
Now you're just watching the tracker and trying to learn from what, has been happening on Thursday and apply that to Saturday. But again, you got to be careful not to make big changes in whatever your plan was. So
I think if I was racing on Saturday, I would have spent the day on the couch on Thursday watching the race.
Yeah,
I think you could have learned a tremendous amount by watching.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I think you're spot on, because I think the one thing it does is it reminds you that it's a long day.
Yeah.
And, you can't go after something that, and, like a sprint race, you can't apply that same mindset to something like this. Yeah, it's a long day. And so, like you talk about taking time in transition, that's time well spent. I know that if you're competing for that top spot in that world championship, you don't want that time to be, any longer than it needs to be. But sometimes faster is going to be slower, and because you do need to use that transition wisely. So you get ready for that next event.
So, John, let's talk a little bit about overbiking, and why that happens and how that happens.
Yeah.
So, in your perspective, why do people overbike? Like, what's the reason behind it?
Oh boy, that's an interesting one. I think, from just thinking about a race and what your goals are, I think far too many people put time goals on each segment.
Yep.
And you want to, and maybe in my case, I'm like, well, I want to be, X out of the water, or, this, I want to be an hour for the swim or whatever. That's, not really a smart way to do it. And I think a lot of people really focus in on the bike split. I want to be under 7 hours. I want to be under 6 hours. I want to be under 6:30. I want to be, wherever, 5:15. And, the conditions change, and going after that bike split for the sake of saying, hey, I did a 5:30, that may not have been the best thing.
Yeah, I think that, you're right. It's almost a crazy thing we do. And I think it comes from, and I don't know, I think it comes from marathoning. where many marathons are relatively flat. The
Mhm.
temperature is usually quite cool. And you could say, you know, I'm going to do this pace and it's going to equal this time.
Right.
The bike is, to me, is so, I don't know if the word right is nebulous, but there's so many variables that
Mhm.
go into a bike that aren't as easy to calculate. Even when we're using things like best bike split, when you start talking about 6 hours on a bike or 7 hours on a bike, the wind conditions change so much. The
Mhm.
temperature, you know, especially when extreme things like this, temperature is so relevant, and the physiologic system is so different, right?
Mhm.
As you get hotter, as you become more fatigued, you get heart rate drift, which we've talked about before. Then there's also the fact of swimming before and the emotions of finishing the swim, running
Mhm.
through transition. You're starting with an elevated heart rate. You're starting with physiologic stress already. And I think sometimes we calculate like bike power when we're fresh, right? So, hey,
Yeah.
let's go do an FTP test, or let's do a critical power test or whatever.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, well, your FTP is 200 watts. Okay. What's your FTP after you swam 2.4 miles?
Mhm. Mhm.
What's your FTP after you did that and it's 84 degrees and 90% humidity?
Right.
Like, I think that, you know, we don't do a good job of that. And
Right.
there's, you know, all these formulas. Oh, okay, for an Ironman, you should do 70% of your FTP.
Mhm.
Maybe in ideal conditions,
Mhm.
right?
And if your FTP test is actually good.
And if your FTP test is good, and
Yeah.
we can get, we've talked a lot about that in the past. We probably need to come back around to that. The other thing that I think ultimately happens, especially in wind or in hilly courses, is your perception of how fast you're going also plays a role.
Mhm.
So if you're going into a headwind and you're seeing the ground move relatively slow, next thing you know, you're actually pushing harder.
Yeah.
Right. And it's an interesting thing because you get a nice big tailwind and you're moving fast. People actually pedal, even if they have the gearing, they don't pedal as hard. Right?
Mhm.
Because the brain is perceptually seeing and feeling like I'm moving fast.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're going into a headwind and you're at 10 miles an hour and you're putting out 200 watts, it's like, oh man, I'm not moving very fast. I need to put more power in. And in a course like this, where you could potentially have headwind both directions, I think that can play a role into, you know, subconsciously overbiking.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to listen to your body even more and look at your metrics like your heart rate, instead of even power. It's, you know, because you know your heart rate, right? Like,
Mhm.
or hopefully a lot of people do. They know their heart rate, and when their heart rate gets, you know, let's say it's above 140, that they're starting to shift into the more of an anaerobic
Mhm.
state. I mean, we know there's a paradigm shift there, and you got to kind of have that number that I'm not going to go over that.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
and it doesn't matter if I'm going uphill, downhill, headwind, or tailwind. I have that cap.
Right.
And especially in conditions that you're not used to.
Mhm.
And I think the smart athlete did that yesterday, and we'll do that tomorrow.
Oh, I think so. And I think we're seeing that with our elite athletes, so especially in this endurance world where they're using not just power, not just heart rate, they're using a combination of both of these.
Yeah.
Because they give you information that is almost in theory the same information, but in practicality, it's different information. And so
Yep.
by using both of the, you know, the mechanical, the power, and look at the physiology, the heart rate, you can hopefully make better decisions and not overbite. But I think what you're talking about with overbiking, it's fun to go fast on the bike.
Heck yeah, it is.
Oh,
But it's not fun to not finish. Not finish because you overbiked.
well, and we're gonna talk about another paper down the road about that just came out. You want to talk, you want to
Yeah.
just give us sort of a preview on that one?
So this actually is an article that came out yesterday, and thanks to Dr. Schilling for sending this to us. But because it came out yesterday, we don't have access to the full article right now. But basically, it's road gradient and cycling power, an observational study in male professional cyclists. So this is male cyclists, and basically what they were doing, they were looking at as the road goes up, the power goes up, and at the same basically perceived exertion, and the interesting thing was it was for everybody. So, and basically it was, the interesting thing to me was the best power for people was between 6 and 7%, 7.3% of gradient.
Yeah.
And I think that we've all kind of felt this, like, hey, when I go uphill a little bit, I can put out more power. So, or I do put out more power. The interesting thing was that pure climbers actually put out even more power than the average person. And it's actually something that kind of differentiated between the people, was if it was a climber, they even put out more power. So I love this article because, and I'm going to ask you this question: when you ride indoors, do you have a block?
Oh, no, I don't. But that's a study that we actually almost did recently, but then, lots of things happened where we sort of closed our lab down for a while.
So from now on, when I'm Zwift racing, I'm going to put myself between about 6.5%.
Well, and that's what the question is on indoor riding. Is a simulated grade like that actually related to an outside grade?
Yeah. And I don't know. It should be. Well, maybe not, because psychologically you're because if it's psychological that you're going up, or is it truly just a biomechanical position?
Well, if you just raise your bike up and you don't move it vertically, you're not doing any new vertical work. If you're outside, you actually are riding uphill, so you're actually doing work to lift that bike upwards. And so this is always, a fun little mechanical sort of brain tease.
Or is it because you're going slower, you actually can rock the bike a little bit more?
Yeah, right.
You stand up potentially more.
That's a great point. And I think when we do get access to the paper, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at, is what's happening with the upper body or the body position, or even the climbing style that the riders are using out of the saddle versus in the saddle.
But I still think this maybe goes back into the perception of overbiking, right? Is this truly because you're going a little slower that it's kind of tricking your mind?
Yeah.
That I can put out more energy or put out more force.
So, well, this is another study. I mean, this could almost be a survey type study to sort of tease into the a mental aspect of cycling, because I don't know the answer to this. Is why do people overbike? Why do they get off the bike and they're so destroyed, knowing that they still have a marathon? But the tendency is to come in and you're not ready to run a marathon at that point.
No, it's true. But I think we've talked about this many times, it's kind of the self-realization of where you are.
Yeah.
And what your fitness is. And it's a tough one,
Well, and I've done this, and I'll even
I've done it. I've overbiked many times.
I mean, St. George, I even tried to not overbike, and then I get off and I'm still already destroyed, which means I still overbiked.
So at St. George this year, and we've talked a little bit about this, I told myself I need to ride as slow as I can.
Yeah.
Until mile 20, when a group of people went by me, I'm like, I can ride with them.
Plans out the door.
So for the next 20 miles, I overbike, and then I'm cramping. Like, it was stupid, right? And I had such a good plan, and I was so good in the beginning. and then I got punched in the mouth, and my plan was gone.
That's right.
So, but once again, I think that's those are experiences, and and I'm going to really try hard not to let that happen again. To let my emotions kind of take over from what truly is going to be best for me in the end of the race.
So that's interesting. I want to tie this in. Matthew asked a question here. Why are some amateurs racing yesterday, Thursday, and some on Saturday? This is a great question. It actually ties in with this, is that the goal ultimately is the females are going to race on one day and the men are going to race on the other day. And hopefully they do flip these, because I think it makes a lot of sense to give the females the Saturday billing and sometimes the males the Saturday billing, just flip it back and forth. But that is an interesting tie-in to what we're talking about here in terms of race dynamics, and especially in the bike road, because one of the problems with the females race is often that the males are interfering, not in a negative way, but they're also riding the course and they're riding at a different pace than some of the female age groupers or even pros, and that can actually interfere with their race. So that would be interesting that if this over biking phenomena happens more or less as we go to females on one day and the males on another day.
Yeah, and I think that is the ultimate plan. But I mean, really, the plan was to get as many people into this race as possible, and for the World Triathlon Corporation to make as much money as possible.
All right.
Because really, we look at the slot allocation for next year, and there's a lot more slots than there ever has been, because they've already announced it's going to be 2 days again.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be double the amount of slots.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, think about it, it's good business.
Mm-hmm.
If you could, if I had a business and I could double my business,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I think it makes sense. Plus there's a backlog of people that ultimately, we didn't have a Kona race for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I really think, honestly, if we think about the long term of this, I hate the fact that if it's only women on Thursday, always,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
should flip flop.
that's not right.
And I know the 70.3 rules, we talked about this on Tuesday when we spoke. They've kept the women on the Friday and they put the men on the Saturday. And I really think that if we're going to have gender equity, which I believe we should have in triathlon, it should rotate.
Yeah. No, I agree. And so to Matthew's question, in terms of why some racing yesterday and some on Saturday, the goal is females on one day, males on the other, but they didn't have enough females to fill the race on one day. And so now they pulled some of the men's age groups over. Why they pulled the ones they pulled, we don't know, but it's partly because they were trying to pick age groups that may not interfere as much with the females race. And I think it was also numbers game in terms of how many were in all those men's age group categories, and then have a balance of men and women on Thursday. But yeah,
But John, if we look at participation in Ironman, full Ironman events, and obviously it varies from country to country, but I think it's like in the 20% the number of women to men.
It's probably even lower than that in Europe. I should remember the number. They announced them at the dinner, but it's I wish Laura was sitting here, she'd know right off the top of her head. But it's even with the split day on Thursday, it was 50-50 women, men, which means that the women are probably about 25% of the entire pool.
And there really are, they're about 25% of the participants in Ironman throughout the world. And so if they end up doing, let's say 2,800 women, 2,800 men, being a woman trying to qualify for the next few years is going to be a lot easier percentage wise than being a male to do it. But then again, it might, and what I'm hoping it will actually increase participation in female Ironman racing.
That's right. Well, and there will be more slots for men too, because now you're taking, instead of 2,800 for split between men and women, the idea would be there'd be 2,800 for men and 2,800 for women. And I don't know if that's what their plan is, but that would make a lot of sense. And I would certainly support that because I agree with you. Increase the participation and it will continue to raise the bar.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. All
So,
right.
oh, you know what,
ahead.
you know, biking and what have you, the other thing, and you asked me the question, what else I learned? What I learned is we got to get GPS tracking. Not having a good tracker system. I mean, this tracking system is far better than, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or, you know, back when the sport started. At least you can get a really good estimate in terms of where your athlete is, especially as you have multiple timing places that they're crossing. Well, boy, I just want to know exactly where my athletes were and when they were moving and when they weren't moving.
So John, there used to be a company, and I know when I did my first Ironman that they would rent you a little GPS tracker. And I actually rented it for my first Ironman, but I didn't wear it because I was like, you know, it's too bulky. I don't want to. I definitely don't want to run with that. And I was like, I want every little aerodynamic advantage. But that being said, like especially on the bike, there's got to be a way to even have the phone, like, you know, and I don't know the phone coverage at Kona, but I assume you get phone coverage the entire way out and back. I mean, I'm looking at my bike right now. There's no reason I can't have a cutout in the frame and I could just have my phone or in the seat post or something and have my phone in there and you could track.
Hey, Norseman, we wore GPS tracker for the whole race and it just fit on our race belt. And
if everyone has to do it, then it's equal for everybody.
And it was just so nice to know, one, to have the confidence that someone knew exactly where I was in terms of that case, and then two, for the support for knowing where the athlete was as well. And you know, I do hope I remember that company, and for whatever reason, I don't think they I don't think they made it. You would think that would have been a pretty hot selling type of.
Well, and you think the technology has got to be at a point now where it can be smaller and you know, and not so obtrusive. So I know, like for example, in professional cycling, they have those little. They're pretty small and they just fit right behind their seat. That is GPS tracking, and not only GPS tracking, but they're sending power data and heart rate data, and you know, it's pretty awesome what we can actually do. And wouldn't that be pretty cool? Like thinking of like as a significant other, and you're actually watching the heart rate and you're watching their power output. I mean, I think that's got to be one of the future things that happens in triathlon. Like, I mean, that would be super cool. Like you're seeing, oh man, they're averaging 198 watts. Great, they're right on their plan, and you know, they go by you and you could yell, "You're over biking."
That's right.
How do you know? Because I'm watching your heart rate and your power.
Yeah, I don't think we're far off from that, where the data will be broadcast and your coach can, you know, will have a service that they can pay for and track those metrics. It makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't think the racing will, you know, require, you know, a high level of knowledge of all metrics, because sometimes you just need to race. You just got to grit it out. Whatever the metrics are, they are, and you're still, you know, you still have to do it. But we are headed in that direction where the metrics are going to be so much easier to get.
That's a good poll question you should ask people is, you know, how much would you pay to have the ability at a race to broadcast your position to your friends and family and coach or whatever? I mean, I'll ask you, how much would you pay?
Oh, me? Don't ask me. I don't.
Oh, I know you're inherently frugal. So John's gonna be like $3.
I paddleboard for 3-4 hours to get a free t-shirt. So
well, no, you get a free paddleboard for 3 or 4 hours.
And I got a free paddleboard for that. Yeah. No, you know, I mean, look at what we pay for Strava or you know, Training Peaks or Form goggles for that matter. It's you know, it's hundreds of dollars a year. And so I would think that type of service would, you know, they probably would have to charge high in the beginning. I'm not a business person, so I don't know the economy of it, but I imagine it'd be something that would be pricey in the beginning, but then it would likely come down.
You know those little trackers that you and I both bought when we were doing our epic events?
Yeah.
Can those broadcast your position?
Oh, yeah, no, you can wear a Garmin in reach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
didn't we have those on our friends yesterday? They're
I don't
tiny.
know. That's a good question. And it's so funny. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't do that.
We have
I
them.
mean, because it's only like this size.
Smaller
And
than
so-
that. Yeah. It weighs basically nothing.
Oh, I don't know. You think
Hindsight.
about things, and then you forget what's right in front of you.
Well, next time your wife does Kona, oh, that's right. She's never doing Kona again. So we don't have to worry about it.
She has established that, but you don't, like we've talked about, you don't make
I know.
decisions
The day
after.
I know.
Just-
But you gotta let him say it. You gotta let him say it.
Your emotion, and I don't think she'd be upset with me. I tell a story after she did her first Ironman in Canada. She said, "I'm never doing that again." And so she's gone on and done. I don't even know how many.
This is 15, right?
Yeah, 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
Well,
amazing.
And then we've told the story before. I when I finished my first 70.3, I said I'll never do that again. I've done like 25 of them. When I finished my first Ironman, same thing. I'll never do another one. So, and that has not come to fruition either. So
No, that's funny.
what you say, actually, this is something I've actually kind of learned, and maybe I'll share this, is what you say after a race really sticks.
Mhm.
So at the last last Ironman I did, I purposely said positive things.
Yeah, good.
Even though I had some negative thoughts, I
Mhm.
told myself, I'm not going to say anything negative today.
Yeah. Mhm.
Like, I need to celebrate the accomplishment. I can write down some negative things and things I want to improve on later.
Mhm.
But for today, I'm only gonna, for the rest of today, it's only gonna be positive things.
Yeah.
And I feel so much better about that race
Mhm.
than a race that I've done before where I've done way better, but then had negative things to say right away.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before, like celebrating the accomplishment,
Mhm.
and celebrating the fact that we can do these things and we can do these like difficult things. Like this is not easy. Triathlon is not easy.
It speaks to the point that even on a bad race, when you cross that finish line, that is a worthy accomplishment and needs to be celebrated, because we toe the start line and it's not guaranteed that you're going to finish every race. I haven't, you haven't, and the longer the race, the more chances are you may not finish, because there are so many elements to these. So anytime you finish, it is really worth celebrating. You may not feel like it, but it really is an amazing accomplishment.
I'm going to tell a quick story. So there's a gentleman that we swim with on Saturdays, and a year ago he saw me swimming in a wetsuit, getting ready for a race, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he just only swims on Saturdays, and we know him, but not that well. I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing a triathlon." "You are? Well, that's awesome. I want to do a triathlon. When's the next one?" And I'm like, "Well, it's Pumpkin Man is next weekend. I'm doing it." So his finish time in the sprint, and I'm just going to tell you, was over 4 hours.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's perseverance.
He's 67 years old.
That's great.
Okay. Basically borrowed a bike and anyhow. So he subsequently does the Las Vegas Triathlon this year. Now, I think he's 68 now. And he finished in 3 hours and 30 minutes. And man, he is like grinning from ear to ear. And they're kind of packed up stuff already. But then he finds out that he's third in his age group. He walks over and he's like, "I need a mug. I need a podium finisher mug." Right?
I love it.
And he's celebrating.
Yeah, that's right.
And he should celebrate it, right? Like the perseverance to be out there for 4 hours or 3.5 hours or whatever the case may be is awesome. And we need to celebrate those things. And
For sure. That's a great story. That is really great.
You should have seen him in his mug. He was so happy.
Yeah.
And now he's getting ready to do Pumpkin Man in 2 weeks. He's just like, I can't wait.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, well, speaking of celebrating, the
Yeah,
crew
go
just came
celebrate.
in, and we are gonna go celebrate with some dinner, so.
Well, celebrate with some dinner, but don't celebrate too much. I'm sure you're gonna be out watching the race tomorrow.
Yeah, it's gonna be still busy day. We've only got 2 of our local athletes doing it, but it will be fun to sort of track not only them, but just see how the
Are you
race
paddleboard duty tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm gonna do paddle boarding again.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Well, have a
I
good
don't-
time out there.
I don't get another shirt, but I'll still get free paddle boarding for it.
Do they at least give you a meal or
Wow.
something? Do you get all of the Powerade or Gatorade you can drink?
Oh, yeah, that's always available.
Okay, good. Don't get dehydrated out there.
That's right. No, totally. I'm taking actually more water
Yeah.
on the paddleboard this time than I did yesterday.
Well, look, I'm sure you lost a lot of fluids yesterday
Oh, yeah.
while you're out there on the paddleboard.
No, I think so.
All right, well, take care of yourself. Enjoy with the crew. Congratulations to everybody that finished yesterday, and good
Yeah.
luck to everyone tomorrow. It's going to be a pretty epic men's race tomorrow. I'm looking forward to tuning in.
Yep, it'll be fun. All right. Talk soon.
Okay, bye-bye.